all set. And so you should be able to share the screen if you need any, or if you need that.
Great, thank you. So good morning. My name is Michelle Thornton. I am an associate professor in the School of Business in the Department of Marketing and Management. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a middle-aged woman with short chin length, dark brown hair, and I am excited to see you all and kind of share my thoughts today on our learning management system and some of its accessibility features. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and along with that, share some slides with you. So I'm going to put in the chat box a link to the slides so that you have them if you would like to follow along or just refer back to them later. And we'll go ahead then and get started with the official slideshow. Okay. Hopefully folks can see the slides. I'm seeing them there on the screen in the classroom. Dan, if you could give me a thumbs up, can you see my slides okay shared? Perfect. All right. So this presentation is developed both by myself and then the Oswego's work group on accessibility practices, which you, I'm sure, have been hearing a lot from us this week if you've been participating in other sessions. We are actively involved in winter breakouts and every day have around 2 different specific focus sections on digital accessibility. So this is one that is specific to going through kind of the process of utilizing some of the features in Brightspace. I'm going to be sharing with you quite a few screenshots from one of my classes. And I should mention that I teach primarily online. So I use Brightspace quite a bit. My classes are all asynchronous. But that being said, if you do not, this I think lecture or presentation will help even understand if you're just using Brightspace for the most basic things like sharing a syllabus or accepting assignments through it. I think everything that we talk about would work for kind of how Brightspace is used supplementally to support face-to-face classes as well. So before we kind of jump right in, I think it's probably useful for us to make sure that we're all on the same page about what we mean around accessibility before I go into the Brightspace components around it. And the way I think about it is a proactive approach to ensuring equity in the materials that we're sharing, in this case, in the digital space. You see here a cartoon on the screen, and this is showing that we have a more physical imagination around accessibility. There's a gentleman who is shoveling snow off the steps. There's some folks that are saying like, hey, if you start by shoveling the ramp, we could all use that and you can get to the steps later. And this individual that's making that request is certainly in a wheelchair. And so for them, if the stairs are cleared, they've got to sit and wait and aren't able to go in if we're waiting to do the ramp. So it's this idea of kind of coming at a barrier, a roadblock, and thinking about it in the most equitable way possible for the purposes of certainly social justice. But I also think about it in terms of inclusivity. And that is making sure that our online spaces are as inclusive as we're trying to make our physical spaces. It's important for us to recognize that 1 in 5 Americans have a disability. Oftentimes those go undisclosed, right? And so accessibility becomes important then because we're not just waiting for students to approach us with accommodations that they may have individually, but instead, if our online spaces are designed with accessibility in mind, then individuals don't have to disclose the fact that they have a disability because the content is set up already with their ability to experience the material the same as anybody else that might be interacting with it. At Oswego, we kind of lean into 5 specific principles of digital accessibility. There are have been lots of presentations this week already introducing you to these principles. That said, if you aren't familiar with them or you're just hearing about them at the first time today, I'm going to kind of do a quick review. And then we will use this as our framework to talk about the different features in Brightspace. So the 5 digital accessibility principles that we focus on are using structured content, providing contextual hyperlinks, using text equivalents for images, ensuring that we have proper color contrast and ratios, and then using plain language. The features that I'm going to really focus though on are the first 4. I will also say, while we're going to be sort of talking about these concepts, we're going to be doing it at a pretty high level since we're using sort of the skills in and the tools in Brightspace. But at the end of today's presentation, I will give you a heads up on a little bit of some of the upcoming sessions that go a little bit deeper dive into each of these different principles. So we're going to start with structured content. And the main thing that you want to think about here is that there's all different ways that we can kind of present written kind of content for our students or colleagues or peers that are interacting with our material. And I'm going to give you kind of some bad examples, and then we're going to work together to use Brightspace to make them better. So the class that I'm going to be showcasing for you, it's called Global Business and Society. And this is a screenshot going directly just into the module. And we're going to be working through the content sections. So it's where we've got the arrow pointing in the top left corner. And in this particular case, what I am going to be showing you is a description of one of the modules that I created. And so if we add a description, here's what I would call my bad example of unstructured content. So in this case, we've got the whole laundry list of what I'm asking my students to do for the week, the readings, what they are, what videos they're meant to be watching, and then the different kinds of activities that they need to participate in. All the information is here. It's laid out in a way that is, I suppose, somewhat orderly, but I think we can do better. And that's how I'm going to kind of show you some of the ways that we can start to structure the content and use these 5 basic principles of digital accessibility. So if we start with the first paragraph that's here, I did kind of call out a heading for it, the required readings and resources, but it was in the same font, text style as everything else. So it wasn't readily apparent that this was a new section that anybody should be directed to pay attention to. Now, I could go in and use Brightspace and just bold this or make the font bigger, something like that. But structured content is a slightly more formal way of doing this. And so that allows for, if someone's using, for example, a screen reader, that they can sort of easily toggle through and navigate from section to section if they're denoted specifically as a heading or kind of tagged in such a way that makes it appear obvious that this is moving from one new section to another. So in this case, right now, you see an arrow up on the top left here in Brightspace, and that is suggesting that this is just part of a basic paragraph. If I click on this drop-down menu here, what you'll see is a whole series of options come that allow me to make the content structured. So I'm going to choose one of these, and in this case, I chose heading 2, and that called this out and made it automatically not only a bolder and bigger font, but by tagging it as a heading, then if someone were to be using a screen reader that is kind of sharing the content with them from an audio standpoint, they would be able to recognize and know that this is a new section. So I would go through in that kind of laundry list of to-do items for this module and highlight and then tag each one of those section headings as a heading 2. Now, the next thing that is important is that within this particular module, I had a few lists that are important to note as well, right? And so this not only visually, for those of us who are seeing individuals and don't have a visual disability, allows us to kind of process the information in a clearer format. Similarly, it tells someone that's using a screen reader that these items are grouped together. So for this case, they had to read 2 parts of our textbook, Conscious Capitalism. And I wanted to kind of identify those as being a grouped list of something that they had to do. So this little kind of icon up in the corner here that has 4 lines and 4 dots, that is our tool of how we can identify that structured content. And when you do that, it goes ahead and gives you the options of either doing it as a bullet point list or a numbered list. I believe that I chose to use the bullet points here. Again, I could have done this if I wanted to, kind of space over and then put my own asterisk or something like that. This keeps it neat. The formatting is clear cut, but most importantly, for those using a screen reader, it is now identified as a concise list of items that all go together. So the next thing we're going to talk a little bit about is when you include a hyperlink or you're linking out to another website. So this happens a lot in my courses on Brightspace. There's all kinds of opportunities where I would like the students to go to an external resource or see some kind of other content that is beyond the container of the Brightspace site. So again, in my bad example that I shared with you earlier, in that case, I just cut and pasted the full web address. We know how long and kind of unwieldy these can get. You start with the HTTPS and it's extensive multiple lines of text. It's really kind of clunky looking for a sighted individual, could create some distractions. But for somebody that were to be using a screen reader, their screen reader would read out that entire address line by line, and it would be jumbled and garbled. It wouldn't make any sense, right? Instead, if we use the tool to identify this as a hyperlink and shorten it to something that's clear and descriptive, then not only, again, does it look cleaner and neater for individuals that are sighted, but also for folks with the visual impairment, this ability creates more meaning around that link. So here's the example. There's a video lecture that I was linking out to around the topic that was based in the books for this particular module. And here is again the bad example. It's showing the accurate hyperlink to this website, but it's also not necessarily one that is all that helpful. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to show you how to convert that. And essentially, all I need to do, there's two different places, is highlight the title of the lecture. So what is conscious capitalism? When I highlight that, this sort of pop-up tool comes up. This chain link item that you see where I have two green arrows to is what we can use to insert the language around the link that we're sending folks out to. And then what happens is that this kind of dialog box comes up. The title is already included here. I put the link here. This is sort of like making it hidden behind the scenes for me, and I hit create. And then what happens is that this becomes a link that can be clicked on, right? So we all recognize items in blue that are underlined as something that is click-throughable to an outside link. In this particular case, though, it also looks cleaner, it's neater. And again, for someone that were to be using a screen reader, they are then signaled and told at this point that this is an external link that they are taking out to, and it's read as what is conscious capitalism and send out to that link. So in the original version, I didn't have any images, but I do sometimes like to include them. Makes it a little bit more visually interesting, or there may be something that it's adding additional information. And we need to be cautious that if we're going to include some type of additional content that is, in this case, some type of image, that we are ensuring that we provide an alternate description of that so that somebody who is unable to see it can kind of take away the same meaning. So I've decided here that I thought it might be useful to put in an image of the textbook that I'm using, just as a reminder or a signal. This particular class has 3 textbooks in it. And so just instead of always writing it out, it's the name, I thought that I would put the visual image of it. So again, if we're in the same kind of screen where we're creating content, up at the top here, this little kind of icon that suggests that you have a mountaintop is where we're going to insert our image. Now, I love this particular feature in Brightspace because basically anytime you're going to put a photo or a picture in, it prompts you to do the accessibility components of this automatically. There's no way to add an image in here without going through the accessibility steps. So this is a great feature of Brightspace that to me was a big upgrade when we switched. So you'd click on the insert image, and then it allows you to add a file. You're going to probably pull this from your desktop or wherever you have it. And then straight out of the gate, the very next thing that you can do before you even insert the image is that you have to provide the alternative texts to it. And this is what then, again, somebody who is using a screen reader would not only learn that there's an image, but they would be told by the screen reader what that image is described as. So I wrote in here that the image shows the textbook cover for the book Conscious Capitalism. Great. Okay. So at that point, the image is inserted where I wanted it, but it's already taking care of the accessibility feature. So I really love this. If you use images in Brightspace, this is a nice sort of like way to prevent you from forgetting or making any mistakes around the accessibility component of it. Things work similarly with the color and contrast in Brightspace. And so we're going to talk about this. I don't tend to use a lot of colored text or big color blocks of images and things like that. I tend to just focus on things that were more black and white in terms of the text. But let's say for some reason that I decided that I do want to highlight or change or maybe draw your eye to a certain section. So in this particular case, I've highlighted the paragraph below the book. And maybe I think it'll just be cute, right? Like if I match the color of this, perhaps to the blue in the printed cover. So up here in our same toolbar that we've been working with for our hyperlinks and our images, you see that the little paintbrush next to the text box. And when I click on that, it allows me to select a color, right? So in this particular case, I went to go kind of choose yellow to match the textbook. And what you're going to find here is it's going to tell me right out of the gate that this does not meet the color contrast options. So this kind of X, in the process of choosing the color, I already know that this is not going to work. So maybe I decide then, okay, let's try for the blue text. And in this case, this is very interesting, is that we learn here that if I'm using small text, so let's say a font size of like 8, something like that, this still would not meet the color contrast ratios. I can use this color in a large version, so that is helpful to know. So in this particular case, I went ahead and I made that switch to the different color of font. And then at this point now I'm going to go ahead and use this interesting little guy here. It's an eye with a check mark, and that is our accessibility checker. So this is now going to go ahead and take a look at my entire piece of content and help me determine if I have any other accessibility barriers in here. So this is interesting, right? The text must have the color contrast ratio saying that I did not essentially meet the requirements. And the reason is because I didn't make it big enough, right? So remember, I told you that this color works at a certain font size, but not at a smaller one. So I would have to either go back and just put it back in black, or I would have to make the text bigger to continue using that. For me, I was like, you know what? Let's just go with the black and continue on from there. So we can now see what this kind of same set of information looks like when it's with structured content, a descriptive hyperlink. The image is there, but we know behind the scenes that the alt text is in there. And again, I'm not using any color contrast or anything like that. And I double checked my work by using that built-in accessibility checker. So I can feel confident now that this is an accessible piece of content within my course in Brightspace. I think also just like if we look, whether it's officially designed as accessible or not, when you kind of compare between the two, it's clear that one looks neater. From a cognitive standpoint, the information is easier to follow. So I want to go ahead and pause there for just a second and see if anybody has any questions about the development of sort of this piece of content and making it accessible. Everybody okay for starters? All right.
The accessibility checker does the entire page, right? Not just what you were just trying to repair.
In the tool that I was just using,
yeah,
that checked it for the content that I was building in that particular that particular section. So yes, not just that
Okay.
color section, but everything that was in
Everything.
that window, but not like the entire module, right? So there
Sounds
is,
good.
there are some other, and I will show some additional features that allow you to kind of do a broader based check, and we'll get to that in just one second. But that built-in one, it works just within the
Basically,
content section.
page by page
Right.
kind of thing.
Exactly.
Got it.
Yep. Any other questions before I move on? All right. So the other tool that I want to share about, so this was a good segue actually, Dan, so is our Ally tool. So Ally is sort of an add-on in Blackboard, and this one, I'm going to talk about two different features within Ally. One that is student focused or student facing, and one that is for us that are content creating with it. So essentially, I think about Ally as sort of like another kind of resource that can kind of help ensure that the content that you upload. So this would be things like if I'm going to upload a Word document, or I'm going to upload a PowerPoint or a PDF, it helps then kind of some of that additional content of us to assess whether or not those items are also accessible. What we just created was using the building content within the Blackboard site. This is sort of used when we upload content from other places. So the other thing that it does is that for that uploaded content, it automatically gives students other formats to access it through. So I'll hold that thought for just a second, and I'll show you kind of how we're thinking about it. So this is, we're going to see some screenshots from a different class, but this particular one is, we're currently in the view as if I was a student viewing the site. What you're going to see here is I'd given them some examples of, there are 4 different PDFs that are all, in this case, research project samples from former students. And this is important because not all of our students know about this feature. And so I think that even though it's automatically there, it's one of those icons that's not necessarily something that students know about or are looking for. So I tend to, when I'm doing either putting it in my syllabus or talking about it in an introduction to my class, I bring this up and share a similar kind of screenshot example for students. So for any type of document or content that's been uploaded, you see this A sign with a download. And when a student were to click on that, this is what pops up. So this is, again, automatically built in. And in this particular case, it shows them what other formats are available for them. So this is useful, certainly for students that have disabilities and might want to be using one of these other types of tools. Perhaps I had a student last semester that was specifically using a screen reader. And for them, they really needed to see everything in HTML. There were just some types of content that didn't work with the screen reader that they used. Also, there's a built-in audio version that will allow for listening, and just essentially you can see kind of here the different possibilities based on what type of tool somebody uses. But again, it might just be, I joke around a little bit. My wife picks up anything to read and immediately falls asleep while she's reading. And so for her, she's always much more likely to listen to something on audio, either while she's working in the yard, doing dishes, doing laundry. So for her, it's, if there was an article or a long set of instructions, something like that, she would download it to the audio version to listen to. So she is a sighted person, but just really interacts with information and content easier from an audio perspective. So we are now looking at that same screen, but from the faculty view. Okay. And in this case, when you kind of see them, you will see that same download icon with the A and the download sign. And then next to that, as a faculty member, you are also able to see where that piece of content ranks in terms of, or rates rather, in terms of its accessibility. So these are 4 PDFs. Many of you know PDFs tend to be one of the least accessible things content that we upload. They have to be remediated to make them accessible for things like screen readers. And these red sort of gears show us that this one is in bad shape. So if I were to click on that, though, it's going to give me a lot of information about how I can fix it. So we're going to go through that. And so you see here that the accessibility score for this particular PDF is 32%. We want to try and get this into the yellow or at least the green. And it essentially tells me and walks me through what the problems are with the document. So similarly to the things that we were just talking about earlier, it notes here that there's images in this PDF that don't have alternative text to describe them. This particular student there was a table that was included in this particular research proposal. It was done as an inserted image. And so because of that, we would need to add alt text to it to describe what's in this particular table. There's a lot going on there on the table, so that would be a slightly complicated process, but I would, were the student to be doing this from scratch, starting from the beginning, I might suggest inserting the table as a table rather than as an image, at any rate. Also, you can see here that this document doesn't have headings. So this goes back to the first thing that we did of structuring the content. And so we can go through and correct the PDF for those items as well. You can do that directly through the Ally Checker. And there are certainly a series of sort of kind of like steps of fixing a PDF that we're not going to go through today, although there are some PDF sessions that we can point you to. But the point is that you use this form of Ally to signal to you of what documents that you have that you may need to kind of create those same fixes for. The last thing I'll say is that Brightspace or D2L is, I would say, pretty committed to the overall accessibility of their site. They have a number of different sort of resources and tools on their website. I'm going to put a link into the chat. I've actually seen this grow significantly just in the time that we have been working with Brightspace on our campus. But they now have communities and messaging boards and video libraries and all kinds of tools around not just accessibility in Brightspace itself, but accessibility in teaching and specifically with digital content. So they seem to be a good partner in this space and have been continually working to try and update their what they're offering and how their functionality works. So with that, I'm actually going to escape out of my screen sharing mode here. So that I can kind of plug these in. I want to share with you a few resources. I'll put those in the chat. And the first one is a link to that, the Brightspace Accessibility Gateway. And then the second one is our own Oswego digital accessibility site. And this is where you're going to see all kinds of archived recordings on the 5 principles of accessibility, things like remediating PDFs, all of those kind of components that we've started talking about today. The other thing I want to mention is that we do have a few upcoming winter breakout sessions on these topics as well. Today at 1, there is a session specifically on structured content, goes much deeper into that than we were able to dive into today. Tomorrow at 10, there's a session on image descriptions and these alt text kind of components. Friday, talking deeper about color and contrast. And then Friday afternoon, one thing we haven't really talked about is videos. This is another thing that happens a lot in Brightspace. And so how to use an interface with Panopto and ensure that the captions are there for to kind of improve the accessibility of the video content that we're sharing. So with that, let me stop share and just kind of check in with folks and see if there's any other questions I can answer, anything about using Brightspace specifically or its accessibility features.
Looks good to me.
Great. I'm going to also put my email address in the chat box. So that way, if you are in the process of working through something in Brightspace, I'm happy to help you with anything I've learned about this. Obviously, our instructional designers, the accessibility fellows, all of those folks are able to provide that assistance as well. But I appreciate everybody being here, and I'm happy to share more information in the future if there's anything that you need.
Could you share your slides for the presentation with us?
Oh, absolutely. You know what, Dan, I think because you
Okay.
were here and then you like popped out for a minute. I did share
Yeah.
them at the beginning, but let me
Oh,
pop it back
okay.
in. I'll go ahead and re-add it at the bottom. There you go. So you'll have access to all of those as well.
Sounds good.
Yeah,
Great.
and Dan, you can, if you go into Google Slides there, you can download it as a PowerPoint if you want to keep it on your desktop.
Absolutely. Yeah.
User tip.
Happy to share them. I know that being able to see, right, like the links and the icons as
Yeah,
you're
go
working
back
off
and-
your
Go back and consult them. Yeah.
Good.
Great.
All right, everybody. Well, enjoy the rest of breakouts. It was great to see you. Have a good rest of your break before we head back to class in a couple of weeks. Take care.
Thanks,
Michelle.